Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, your host today, and the topic again we would all have an answer to. What is the scariest nightmare you have ever had? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was wandering through a creepy, empty Victorian house trying to find a baby that was crying. The baby was screaming and I couldn't find it. Finally, I got to the bottom of a staircase, and in a living room, a doctor had the screaming baby in a blanket, and he put it on the ground, reaches into his bag and pulled out a scalpel. He cut the baby down the middle, and it unfolded like it was a blanket. There was a tape recorder inside playing the crying noise, and the doctor just hit stop on the recorder. I was like 8 or 9 when I had that dream. It still freaks me out to think of it. When I was like 8, I was terrified of the creature from the cover of One Missed Call. I remember having this nightmare where I was on a very small island in the middle of the ocean, so small probably the size of a house with one big rock in the middle. It was the middle of the night and completely pitch black. There was a small stream of light from the moon on the ocean. In it, there was the creature slowly rowing towards me in a small boat, smiling at me. Ugh, it was so scary. I'll never forget it. I was walking in a mall with my parents, and we decided to go into a fancy clothing store. I was mesmerized by how fancy that place was that I didn't realize that my parents left. When I realized that they left, I tried to exit the store, but the door wouldn't open. I then looked behind me, and the store turned into a supermarket with all the lights off. There were multiple creatures that looked like the alternates from the Mandela catalog, but their eyes were white, and they were shining brightly. They kept repeating the phrase, "This isn't real," over and over again until I woke up. I was on a farm in the middle of the night, lost, I think. I hopped a fence and my legs got really itchy. I found a clearing with some light and started to scratch my legs. I felt little bumps under my skin. I walked into the farmhouse and looked at my legs. The bumps were moving under the skin. I freaked out and started scratching my legs as hard as I could. Then all of a sudden the skin breaks and thousands of bright yellow wolf spiders come pouring out of my legs. It just won't stop. I woke up with a cold sweat and couldn't get back to sleep. Had to sit in the shower for 30 minutes and start my day at 5 a.m. on a Saturday. So I had this recurring nightmare a few years ago. For context, it's been years since I've had any dreams, good or bad. So I wake up in this majestic house like it's perfect and every room has something awesome in it, but I'm completely aware I'm sleeping and feel this utterly crushing sense of terror which paralyzes me. Which is weird since the more afraid I am, the more likely I am to fight or run. I don't typically freeze in terror. So, I start looking around to see what's wrong, and I'm drawn to the back of the house. The walls start rotting, and lights start falling as I walk deeper into the house. I want to stop and run, but something is calling to me, like I need to see what's in there. Eventually, everything around me is decrepit, and I reach a door. I know that behind that door is the thing terrifying me, but I must see it. As I go to open the door, I wake up. The dream continues to repeat, and I know it's repeating even while in the dream. I know I must face whatever is in there to break the loop, but the terror I feel is so overwhelming that every time I try to open the door, I wake up in bed covered in sweat and my heart pounding. After like a month of this happening, I eventually manage to open the door, and I see some deformed woman-like thing on the ground reaching for me. The terror leaves my body and is replaced with pity and despair. I feel like this thing was calling for help, so I reach out to help her. She grabs my hand and I'm instantly awake. I haven't had a dream since then. No clue what she was or what the hell caused those nightmares to begin, but just the memory of that house makes me want to run for my life, even writing this. I found this fascinating. I could see how that would be terrifying, like a kind of Russian doll, constantly evolving. But so, dream interpreters out here in the comment section, what do you make of this one and all of these? I used to have sleep paralysis. The attic trapdoor was in my bedroom. It's just a little door in the ceiling that leads to the attic. I had a repetitive dream of a creature that was about 8 feet long, about horse height, 4 legs with talons on each, a face and a jaw like a gulper eel, on a long neck with 4 milky white eyes that would blink wetly. It had a long tail and the skin was leathery and wet like an eel. It would sinuously crawl out of the attic trap, followed by an inky, oppressive darkness. It would sniff around the room like it was looking for me. I'd watch it, unable to move until my whole body woke up, and it would disappear. I also would have a recurring sleep paralysis dream where a skin and bones man with pale skin and visible veins and lots of blotchy red spots on his skin would crawl animally out from under the bed. He was mostly bald with a few strings of lank gray hair. His eye sockets were empty and his teeth a ruin of broken teeth. His ribs would be showing like he was so hungry, and he would turn his empty, ruined eye sockets to me and just stare and breathe, smiling, with his tense skeletal fingers clutching at the carpet on the floor. I have drawings of both creatures in sketchbooks from when I was younger. I haven't had sleep paralysis in over a decade. I have no clue why it stopped. I had this nightmare in the first grade, and I remember it to this day. Although it's not the scariest, it's the most memorable. I woke up and went to school every day for a few weeks right after summer break had ended. Everything was normal. We even had a new student. But people started to go missing. Several people, students, teachers, you name it. Then one day after recess had ended, I hid in the bushes because I didn't want to go back inside for class. That's when I saw it. A teacher was telling the new girl to go inside because break had ended. Right there, she literally turned him into a 2-meter tall pink frosted donut and ate him in like 2 seconds too. Then she slowly turned her head towards me and stared at me. That's when I started running. The rest of the dream was me running all the way home, the exact same path through the trees and bushes I took every day, except it took forever. And for absolutely no reason, right before my house, she caught up to me. I told her I wouldn't tell anyone if she wanted to be friends. Then she said yes, and I woke up. If you had the ability to turn people into giant donuts and eat them, would you do it? Is it murder? I rarely dream, so nightmares are even enjoyed. I kinda half know at the time they aren't real. Gonna be light, but the worst I had was probably me getting ready for an exam, doing last-minute prep, going into an exam, and knowing I had failed it. I had no idea what the answers were, and just felt like an idiot. This actually happened before, but in reality, I had passed that module already, and didn't care about the exam, but it was the first time I had never revised for an exam, and I never felt so stupid in my life. I felt like shit, and felt my life was over, and I was a failure. I was thinking about how I will explain this to everyone I know, how I would have to spend a year retaking myself since everyone I know graduated, how I had screwed my plans and my dreams up, etc. It just felt so real. I then woke up, all sweaty in a mild panic attack, feeling like I needed to vomit. It then dawned on me exams were over 2 weeks ago, and I had nothing to worry about. Gonna be honest, exams were probably one of the most stressful points in my life. I never had panic attacks, but had them multiple times in the last year because of, as well as my MSc. It doesn't help my main motivation during uni was simply the consequences of failure. I was going to bed early, and eventually I fell asleep. So the nightmare was me and my family were getting ready for a doctor's appointment, and you know it was all fun, so we walk there like normal, laughing, etc. We arrive, and after the appointment we go to leave. Everybody was walking ahead in front of me, so I start running to catch up, but instead I was running in slow motion. So at that point, I was shitting myself. I was like, oh god, I have to scream, what's happening? So I started crying and screaming, but I realized I couldn't speak. So I keep screaming, and as I got closer, they got further away. Then the halls started getting longer and longer. So I tried screaming again, but I couldn't again. Then I started to feel like I was being choked, and again I was crying. The next day I woke up in my mom's bed and they told me, last night was weird. You were sleepwalking down the stairs and you stopped in the middle of the hall, crying, calling mom's name. I was touring a house, but when I opened the door, it led me into the living room of the apartment I lived in when I was 5. I bathed in nostalgia as I rummaged through all the things that were lying around, but as soon as I looked at the other door in this room, I felt a slight shiver go down my spine that was almost completely drowned out by the nostalgia. I got curious and went to that door, expecting it to lead to the kitchen of this particular house, but instead the door took me to the room my brother and I shared in another apartment we lived in when we were in middle school. Again, I took my time rummaging through the video games and stuff, reminiscing about all the memories I had there. Like before, as soon as I finished, I looked at the door again and felt that chill down my spine get stronger. I get up to leave the room, and like before, it takes me to another room of another house apartment I lived in the past. I would reminisce and bathe in all the nostalgia of the great memories I had of those rooms or houses, but the more rooms I went through, the darker the rooms got, and the more that feeling of dread and terror grew, to the point that I became completely overwhelmed by it. By the time it got really bad, I was ready to walk out the door of the last house I ended up in, but instead of the sunlit outdoors, The door led me into a dark, vast basement that was basically made of the worst parts of every basement I've ever had been in. It was completely dark except for the middle, where there was one hanging light bulb above a figure of a person kneeling on the floor. By now, the feeling of terror was suffocating, but I still grabbed a pipe as a weapon and approached the person. As I steadily got closer, I see that the figure under the light was a woman kneeling on the floor with her back facing me, and I could hear that she was sobbing. I lowered my guard, asking her if she was okay, and approached her to tap her on the shoulder to see if she was okay. As soon as I did, she turns around, suddenly going from sobbing to belligerently crying, and starts screaming at me with an unnaturally loud, screeching voice. "You killed him! Why did you kill my son?" I was freaked out, but I did not attack her. I fully expected her to have the demonically distorted faces from all those horror movies and stuff, but she looked like a regular woman who was grieving, and I just could not get myself to hurt her. Instead, she kept screaming the same thing over and over again. Her voice got louder and louder. I saw that she was growing bigger and bigger, or maybe I was somehow becoming smaller and smaller, was hard to tell. And eventually, she was now a giant, towering over me, pressing me down with her hands while moving her face right up to mine, glaring at me with her teary, bloodshot eyes. I felt oppressed by her voice and her breath, but I felt completely overwhelmed by a horrific sense of guilt the more she screamed at me. For some reason, I felt that I have met this woman before, and that I really might have killed her son, or at least got her son killed by accident. But I could not remember at all. More accurately, I realized that I might have actually suppressed the memory years ago, or something. So I tried to dig deep into my memories, hoping to remember and apologize to this woman so that she would let me go. I think back as far as I could, because in real life I was definitely a clumsy and careless kid who got a lot of people hurt. I thought back to a lot of those people I almost forgot about from my childhood, and thought I had to relive the memory of getting them hurt. I had to keep reminding myself that they all were okay in the end. I then thought of a lot of other people I might have hurt when I was very young but could not remember at all. I thought, what if when I was 3 I pushed some kid down the stairs? What if I somehow tripped and pushed some other kid off the subway platform? And so on. The worst part was that the more I fabricated these scenarios, the more they seemed to transform into actual buried memories. The more I did this, the more weighted down by guilt I became, to the point that I almost gave up trying to remember and just accepting my judgment and punishment by this now gargantuan woman. Just as I was about to fully give up, some voice within me screamed, "You did nothing wrong, get up." Immediately, I shook off my depressed state and started chanting, "I did nothing wrong." At first, I could only whisper it, but eventually I found the strength to say it louder and louder, eventually shouting it on the top of my lungs. As I did that, I saw the woman becoming smaller and less menacing, and I kept going until she was back to her initial size. In the end, I stood over her and told her, "I don't know who you are and what you think I did, but you will not hold me back with your guilt," or something like that. I left her sobbing on the floor and headed towards the door again. Right before I turned the doorknob, she said, "I'll find you again, and I will never forgive you for killing my son." I just walked out the door and into the sun, which was when I woke up. The worst part about this dream was that for a solid month I kept asking myself, what if I actually did get some woman's son killed, and either completely forgot about it and or suppressed the memory into the deepest depths of my mind. It completely consumed me, to the point that I started looking through old newspaper archives and actually sat down with my mom and other older relatives to ask them this question. Thankfully, they confirmed that nothing like this ever happened, despite how clumsy and careless I was as a kid. Eventually, I told my friends about this dream, and they said they had eerily similar ones, but thankfully they also said it is a common one if you have certain unresolved issues or something like that, lol. So I was at my aunt's house. She had just died a few weeks prior, and it was dark at night, so I decide I need to go because no one is home. As I'm approaching my old-ass Honda Civic, I see a figure in the distance, someone walking towards my general direction, no biggie, but I get this sense of unease. I better get on my car and go now. I put my keys in the ignition, but of course my effing car doesn't start. I try a few times, no luck. The person is still walking towards me. They're dressed in this black trench coat and fedora hat. I start to feel cold sweats. I try a few more times, but the car just won't start. This person walks in front of my car and suddenly stops, stays still for a few seconds, and now I'm panicking. The car won't start. I look in front of me and the person turns very slowly towards me and reveals a paper white face with no eyes, no nose, no facial features whatsoever, but this huge grin of yellow teeth. I'm talking creepy cartoon grin that covers half of his face. At this point, I'm paralyzed. He starts climbing the hood of the car and moves through my windshield. His face is about 2 inches from mine. I'm about to be eaten is what I think. Suddenly, my brain starts to function, and I convince myself that I'm dreaming. This can't be real, so somehow I wake myself up. I'm kind of relieved until I notice that I can't move a muscle. Yep, I also got sleep paralysis. The sweat on my bed was like someone just dumped a bucket of water. 10 out of 10. Would dream that again. Starts with me carrying ice cubes for the shop going past my grandparents' altar. It's still dark, but likely in the morning when I go back, I go to the basin with a mirror to wash my hands besides the altar. I look in the mirror and I see myself faceless, and then I spin like a helicopter blade. I got no headache. When I'm back, my sister accompanied me. While we go to the altar, we use a flashlight instead of the light switch. When my sister is busy, I want to look in the mirror again. But before I did, my sister screamed. I turned and saw a pool of blood coming out from the altar. We run to our parents and told them about it in the living room. One of us pointed out 2 human figures in red moved past the terrace, between the living room and the altar. After they left, the nightmare ended. The dream is clear, though some of the events are a bit blurry. For instance, when I asked my sister to accompany me, I remember my father followed us and saw it as well. Also, it may be a lucid dream. Maybe that's why I was spinning, to avoid getting jump scared. That may be stupid, but I've been jump scared before in dreams, so avoiding it is good. Luckily, I don't get jump scared. What? A series of dreams. It was a forest, and in the roots of the trees there was a descent into the ground. All my dear relatives went there and disappeared. First, we went with my mother. This place lures you deep, for example. In it, you lose an item and go to return it, but in the end, you get lost. In general, at my first, mother was lost. Then, we went to look for her with my aunt, and in the next dream, guess what? She disappeared too. Then we went with my grandfather, but I managed to take him away. I remember I pulled him to the exit with all my might, and then he remembered that he had lost his glasses. We were incredibly lucky. They were very close. I grabbed them and ran away with him. It really was creepy. For about a week, I was afraid to see this dream again. He dreamed me 3 nights in a row.